FM synthesis is the king of bass because it's extremely versatile. I mean, you can make simple bass sounds, you can make plucks, growls, or really anything in between with very little effort. And in this video, I want to show you guys how small changes and tweaks to your patch, even the initial preset, can yield some dramatic results. And so after this, you'll have some straightforward ideas for a few different bass sounds that you'll be able to use in your own music right away. So let's get started. Everybody's heard of vibrato, right? But we're doing the same thing as vibrato when we add some frequency modulation, some pitch modulation. So if we use an LFO and we increase the rate and the amount here, like maybe a human vibrato sounds a little bit more like that speed, but when we start adding in a much higher rate and a higher amount of frequency modulation, it starts to create all these really interesting harmonics inside of our synth here. They kind of start to collect on one another. So if I change this to the high amount here and we do the same thing. And at certain points, they become harmonically related, which is exactly what we're trying to do here with the synth-like operator, which is a frequency modulation synth. And about bass sound specifically, it's all about the harmonics that are present. So FM gives us a really nice way of creating interesting harmonics and therefore some interesting bass sounds. Now, FM is really great for making complex sounds, but also for making simple sounds, okay? If we just hold down a C note that's, a couple of octaves below C3, and we change this coarse value, it's going to change the pitch. Now this becomes important because these are what are going to be harmonically related to the pitch that we choose on our keyboard here. So what we're trying to do with frequency modulation is have each one of these operators affect the pitch of the others to create interesting harmonics. So you can see that there's some colors down here on the bottom right, and this shows you the configuration of how things are related to one another in the effect chain. So you can kind of think of this like a channel strip. The top affects the next one, which affects the next one, which affects the next one. So what I recommend you do for just like a simple patch is to start off with each of the operators on the coarse level that it starts on, which is 1. Kind of a what you see is what you get. Now all we're gonna do is adjust each one of these levels and one other control to kind of create a really basic bass sound here. So let's bring this up. Until some nice harmonics are created. You can kind of see here some of those other harmonics that are created in relation to the fundamental frequency that we're playing. And then let's increase the second one here a little bit higher. And then also let's make sure that our voices are on 1 so that this is a bass sound after all. Okay, so we might start off with something like this for our most basic bass sound. And what I like to do is you can think of each one of these levels as kind of it's affecting a different part of the spectrum. So the second operator is kind of the lower mids, and the third operator is kind of the upper mids. So if you're deciding that you want more of a chill sound, bring down the third one. If you want more lower mids, you want it to have more of like a saturated sound almost. You kind of bring up the second one, okay? So you can kind of choose how you want your bass to sound based on that. And also remember too that we're just dealing with sine waves alone, which is the simplest of all the waveforms, okay? It's really all you need most of the time is just messing with sine waves. The moment you add more and more harmonics, the crazier it gets, okay? So I recommend you always start with sine waves first and then add in other types of waveforms if you feel like it needs something a little bit extra. One cool thing that you can do though is you can go to one of these other operators that's kind of affecting the harmonics of our bass sound, and you can change the phase a little bit. So what I like to do is kind of increase the phase and shift that waveform to the left, just so that it's starting on its peak. So I'm going to do that for both of them here. You can see that I'm kind of shifting them to the left here. And then you can hear there's a little bit of a click on the beginning. So if I increase the attack by 1 millisecond for our first operator, yeah, it's kind of more of a consistent sound to it. FM synthesis is really great also for a plucked bass sound. You can get so many variations out of just like a couple of tweaks here. So let's take a look at that in action. So the first thing we'll do here is just adjust the configuration from something a little bit different than the default one, which is where everything is stacked up sort of like a channel strip. We're gonna move to the one that's just next to it, which kind of looks like a T. And each one of these squares corresponds to the colors of each of these operators, so you know which thing is affecting which. So here you can see that the turquoise is affecting the yellow, which means that anytime we change the level of B, it's going to affect the sound of A, and essentially the sound of the entire synth. Every time we change C or D, it's going to affect the other two. So the configuration really makes a big difference to how the end result turns out. And all I'm going to do is, while I am going to stick with a very simple waveform, we're going to spice it up ever so slightly, this sine wave here. So if you click on it, it'll open up all these bars, and you'll see that you can change the view of how many bars you're looking at to a lower amount. And this is useful because with bass sounds, it's all about kind of like the lower harmonics. And so if you can zoom in and click a little bit more precisely, it's nice. So all I'm going to do is take this sub sound and just start to add in some of this second harmonic here, and you'll hear what it sounds like. And you can do this with any of them, right? Make your own waveforms or whatever, but I'm just gonna keep it real simple. Add in a little bit of extra juice there. So next, let's just bring down the sustain of our main first operator here. I'm just gonna bring it down to about -12. So we have a little bit of an envelope here, more of a thump. And next, we know from our configuration that B is going to affect A, which is what we want. Now, I want you to listen to what happens when you adjust the coarse value. So you change this knob here, and you get some really interesting sounds right off the bat. Okay, so let's increase the level of this so we can hear it a little bit. Now, I recommend you start off with some lower values because they tend to sound a little bit nicer for bass sounds, but of course you can experiment and use some other ones. But let's pick one of these coarse values that we like. Yeah, like say I like this coarse value 4. And let's also just lengthen the decay on this B operator so we can kind of slowly let it, yeah, kind of hollow out the sound a little bit. And again, looking at the configuration, we know that operator C and D is affecting the first two because they're on the very top. So all I'm going to do is I'm actually going to mute C and just use the very top one here and show you what it sounds like when we just add in one more sine wave to the mix here. And again, we're just being subtle. So I'm going to leave the coarse value on 1, and let's just increase the level here and see what happens. So it adds in just a little bit more oomph to the mix here. But we can make it sound even better too if we just increase this phase a little bit. It kind of lines things up a little bit more nicely. So again, we're just going to increase the phase and change where the waveform is starting from. I always kind of like to start like where this the apex of the waveform is here. So you can already hear that it's a little bit different. So let's turn it up just a little bit here and take a listen to the difference of having this very top operator on or off. So it kind of nicely rounds out that sound a little bit and makes it sound a little bit thicker. And I barely did any work. I just increased the level of that one and kept the coarse value the same, and I'm just using a sine wave here. We already have a really cool pluck sound. And the beauty of this too is you can just change this coarse value and change the sound completely. And then of course, when we add in a little bit of compression and saturation, it gets even better. Now, lastly, what I want to show is you can also make some crazy bass sounds really easily as well. In fact, it's easier to make crazier sounds than it is more subtle sounds. So as an example, what we're going to do is let's just start off with this first operator here. Just a normal boring sine wave. And we're going to change this waveform to, let's do square 6. Okay, so the first 6 harmonics of a square waveform. And again, I'm going to use a more complex waveform to start with because I want the sound to be insane. If you want it to be subtle, you got to just start with a sine wave. So this is kind of what it sounds like. And what I'm gonna do is change the configuration to my favorite one, which is this square configuration, which means that B is affecting A and D is affecting C. I really like to use this configuration because you can have two different operators working in parallel, so kind of like two synths that could sound completely different, and they each have their own FM synthesis happening that are independent of one another. So you can get some really cool sounds that way. So what we're gonna do is change this coarse value to 0.5 and lower it. Bring the release down a little bit. Next, let's work on this operator B here. And what I'm gonna do is increase this level here. And bring up the sustain so it kind of affects it the entire time. Somewhere about right here. So now what we're gonna do is mess around with this coarse value here. Yeah, I want it to be really crazy, almost like it's, you know, it's screaming at you. And again, the nice thing about using this configuration is we can add in another basically pure form of the note that we're playing, because this previous one is being affected by operator B. So it's adding in all those crazy harmonics, but it's nice to reinforce the note that we're actually playing by increasing this separate operator here. And what's lovely about sounds like this that are crazy is that you can throw on a saturator and it takes to it so nicely. Listen to this. So what I like to do is maybe you can add in a little bit of a pitch envelope here, like a slow one. Okay, so if I increase the decay here. Yeah, so maybe what you do is you start off the drop with something like a lower value like this, right? And then you increase the coarse value. And we're really just changing one knob and it sounds completely different every single time, right? So really this is just scratching the surface as far as what you can do with FM synthesis and bass sounds. But I wanted to give you a really good foundation of sounds that you can start to create some cool variations with. And you don't have to change very much. It requires very, very little effort, which is what I love about it. So if you did enjoy this little FM synthesis expo with bass sounds, let me know in a comment down below, and I'd be happy to go over more sounds that you can do with it in the future. And until next time, happy music making, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care. Peace.